Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Welcome back, everybody. It's time again for another episode of Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Happy to welcome filmmaker Kurt Mattila to the program. Kurt, welcome.
Good to be here, John. Thanks for having me, man.
Well, thank you for making this incredible movie, Stuntman, that is playing on Disney Plus, and it's an incredible story, as you can see there from the description. Stuntman Eddie Braun attempts to complete Evel Knievel's legendary Snake River Canyon rocket jump, and what an adventure that you display in the film. But as you were just telling me off the air, what an adventure, I guess, making this movie.
Yeah, it was quite an odyssey, both on camera and off camera. But I just want to say, long time listener, first time guest, and to sort of be in the same virtual couch as Walt Simonson, Howard Chaykin, Mark Waid, Tom King, all those guys. This is truly an honor to be on here, dude.
Well, you've got a reserved seat right now at any time, man, and absolutely. And thank you for being part of the League of Word Balloon Listeners. That's incredibly kind. And
proud member.
Well, you're terrific for being like that, man. Thank you very much. And I know the League is listening and watching and going, "Hey, it's one of us." That's awesome. And again, this is what I love about Word Balloon. Truly, is over the years getting to meet people like yourself that are fulfilling their dreams and doing what they want to do. It's a lot of the comic creators and people like Lucifer showrunner Joe Henderson. I mean, I knew him back when he was struggling and just breaking in. And I'm a longtime radio guy, and we're all doing what we want to do. And I think this is awesome. So again, I'm excited to talk not only about the Stuntman, but also about your other film projects that you got going.
Oh, cool. And I just say, what I also love about your show is every guest you have on always sort of unlocks some kind of memory that I have about comics. And just real quick, I was listening to the Stephen Grant one yesterday, and I love the moment where he brought up how his Punisher run ran out early and sold out. And that totally reminded me that, there's like a handful of wall books in the mid 80s that, for whatever reason just popped. And I'm like a bad prospector. I missed all of them. I had G.I. Joe #2, but the cover ripped off, and that was going for $70. I missed the McFarlane, Hulk Wolverine team up. But goddamn, I picked up Punisher 1 and 2 randomly at New England Comics. I was like, I finally got one here. So,
wow.
I was a collector. I was not I didn't do it for money by any stretch of means, but you still get how did I miss that? How did I miss Death in the Family 2? That's now $150, and I just want to see what happened. I don't. Is there any chance you could take it down off the wall, let me read it, and I'll put it back in and just go in now that, so that was before all the trade paperbacks and all.
I don't normally do that either, but when Superman and Lois debuted this year on the CW, I remembered this great imaginary story from the 60s. And it was, what if Superman had two sons and one had powers and one didn't? Yeah. And I'm like, I mean, I've really seen what's been going on in the last year, and all these key issues just inflated in demand and value. And I'm like, all right, I'm not going to buy it, a pristine, $100, $200 copy or anything. I'm like, I'll get a reader copy. Let me see if that actually ticks up. I haven't seen it tick up at all. I'm not embarrassed to buy it, because really it was one of my favorite comics when it was reprinted in an 80-page giant back in the 70s. But it was. I'm like, oh, this is cool. So yeah, it is. It's been insane watching how much the wall books have jumped up in price the last year.
Great.
Very weird.
The old West Coast Avengers with the White Vision. I did score that one too. I'm like, huh,
nice.
How the hell did that command such a? But it's like a reader copy, so it's you never thought hey, one day this will be very valuable because of a Disney Plus thing. What's that? You'll find out soon enough.
Seriously, we're embarrassed with the amount of great geek programming. I mean, honestly, it's insane. And really, if only my 14-year-old self, or even younger, when those Marvel 70s movies were coming out, and it's like, all right, it's not as good as the comic, but at least it's something, and they're paying attention. That's cool. And now it's like, oh my God, the level of closeness to the books is just insane. And I didn't even realize watching Loki that Sylvie, until she started saying, well, I'll enchant them. I'm like, oh, that's the Enchantress. I'm like, that's good. I'm like, I like that. And then I looked up, I'm like, sure enough, that was one of her incarnations. So I'm like, all right, that's cool.
Yeah, they were being kind of coy about that, because I was like, this is the Enchantress. What's the mystery? And like, oh no, she's a female Loki variant. I'm like, no, that's the Enchantress. She kind of, enchants people. The humans ran in with her. So she's bad news, but maybe she can be reformed. So, that's weird.
How about Richard Grant as older Loki? It's if they, and I love Tom Hiddleston, but I'm like, if they want to kill off Tom Hiddleston and switch to Richard Grant, I'm like, God damn, that's 616 Loki. I'm like, he was so fucking perfect. I'm like, this is great. So, and Kid Loki was terrific too, but I'm just like, and like I said, I love Hiddleston, but I'm like, it is so great to see 616 Loki pop up in that series. That was fantastic.
I know. I was like, that's. I want season 2 just to be that Richard Grant with the horns and all that kind of stuff, and just sort of and again, enchanting the Wrecker's, hammer or something, like his crowbar or something, make that a whole thing, and that'd be great.
Well, that's why just the weird stunt casting they've done, like when Julia Louis-Dreyfus shows up as Valentina, the Contessa, and I'm just like, that is great, and that is perfect. And how cool is Julia Louis-Dreyfus, where she's like, yeah, I'll play. That sounds like fun. And it's like, that's amazing. So, yeah.
Have you seen Black Widow yet?
No. You know something? I've been too busy because I'm getting ready for Terrificon. I got to throw up the card.
Oh, yeah.
This weekend, everybody, Terrificon in Connecticut. It's going to be a blast. We're going to have a lot of fun and do a lot of fun panels. But, yeah, I've been, prepping for that and, keeping the show going and stuff. So, but I'll see it. I'll probably see it when I get back. Right in time for Suicide Squad too.
Good spy thriller. That's all.
Good.
Good. Cold War era, the geopolitics, and a little. It's sort of a throwback to the '80s a little bit. There's definitely some hey, let's make fun of the Russians and stuff. But it's awesome.
Sure.
I thought it was really good. So.
That's good to hear, man. Because Winter Soldier is still my favorite Marvel movie because of the whole spy thing and everything. That's the one that I love the most. So. That's really good to hear. And I'm really looking forward to seeing David Harbour. And I always forget her name, the other younger Black
Florence
Widow.
Pugh.
Yes. Man, she's great in Fighting with My Family, that great WWE movie. Good Lord.
Yeah. She's great. And she, I don't want to say steals the show because obviously, it's Scarlett Johansson's film, but, she brings a Russian accent to it and stuff. And I first read Black Widow in a Daredevil comic. I think it was the one that Harlan Ellison wrote. And I just remember he had a terrible night. He almost got killed by a house. And he stumbles at 4:00 in the morning to the Black Widow's house, and she lets him in. And she just seemed very stoic and rushed. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting character. And as much as I love it, I always thought I wish Scarlett Johansson had a little bit of a Russian accent. That'd be kind of cool. But you know what? The fact that these movies are good and we have Thanos, these are nitpicks that we should nitpick because they're fantastic. So.
I hear you, man. I'm just getting into the He-Man Netflix show because I'm going to talk to Tim Seeley tomorrow, and Tim is a real He-Man expert. In fact, writing a He-Man miniseries right now for DC, and I saw the big, flap about it all. It's more about the girls. It's not about He-Man. I'm like, I want to see for myself, and I'm kind of the perfect lab rat because I was too old for He-Man back in the day. At that point, I was trying to get girls. I'm like, Thundercats, He-Man. I'm like, that's great. I'll be at the bar. You guys.
You girls like Manny Faces. You girls like Beast Men. You could totally pick them up with some He-Man toys. No, I'm curious to see it because I always loved the designs of the characters. I thought Stratos and Man-at-Arms. I thought the toy designs were amazing. I just wasn't that into the fact that they all were so roided out and jacked and everyone everyone on Eternia has the same exact trainer and they're all taking the same sort of special steroids because they're all and it's I get it. It was early 80s, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you had all your action stars, so it makes sense to kind of capitalize that. But as a scrawny little kid in Massachusetts, I really wish I could relate to this a little more, but that was the one thing that always kind of turned me off. I mean, I watched every episode, bought all the toys, but it was sort of reluctant, So I'm curious to see this one.
That's cool. I'll tell you without spoiling. I think the design is fantastic. Honestly, and the animation, it looks great. It's a great evolution from the Filmation product, which I never had a problem with. I know people are like, oh, that limited animation and same kind of running scenes and the rotoscope that they used or whatever. Right. And I'm like, yeah, but the writing was there. And I mean, that's what I always say about the original animated Star Trek. I'm like, yeah, limited animation, but they had the whole cast except poor Chekhov, and the writing was there. So it was all right,
Why did Chekhov not show up? I remember there's a story.
Oh no, it was Filmation and money. They didn't want to get anyone beyond Shatner, Nimoy, and Kelly. And Nimoy's like, you better get the rest of the cast or I'm not doing this. So they're like, all right, fine. So they got they were going to have James Doohan double for a bunch of people and also Majel Barrett double and triple for people. And it's like, yeah, no, you're hiring everybody or I'm not doing it. And it's like, way to go, Nimoy. All right, that's cool.
Yeah. So that stuff was great. It wasn't as long as it wasn't in the style of those early 60s Marvel stuff, the sort of cut and paste Jack Kirby stuff. I had no beef.
I'm hip, but I got to be honest, man. That was probably my first exposure to Marvel as a really, really little kid. That and the old Spider-Man series. So that stuff I still love it. As goofy as that looked, and the really limited animation of. All right, we'll move an arm. All right, great.
Yeah. Hey.
Well, you have a lot more animation in your film, man. Again, the Stuntman, and just the whole notion of Eddie, the Stuntman himself. Trying to replicate and win the stunt that Evel Knievel, unfortunately wasn't able to do and jump over the Snake River Canyon. Like I told you off the air, man, it had my attention. Anytime Evel was jumping, we were there. And I mean, I remember that George Hamilton movie and all that stuff. I mean, no, Evel was the closest thing to a real superhero,
There's a unaired pilot where Sam Elliott plays Evel Knievel. And it was just it's a really fascinating thing because you could tell they were trying to capitalize on sort of the heyday of action TV shows, late 70s, early 80s.
Sure.
But I think they realized at the end of the third act that so does he fight crime or not? We're not quite sure. And if he does, is it with his motorcycle? And there's only so many corrupt, circus carnival owners that he could face in a season before we really got a kind of thing, but it was cool because it capitalized on that superhero-ness of it. It was just neat to see, Sam Elliott with the cape and then the outfit and stuff. But the film is, it is about this stuntman's quest to complete Evil's mission, but it's also sort of a window into stuntmen and the stunt community. I met Eddie Braun, who's the subject. We actually met professionally. I had been directing commercials and all sorts of weird little things. And I finally got my big break making car commercials. And someone from production was just like, hey, you're going to need a stunt driver for these things. Do you mind if we pull in one of the best, or do you want to audition people? I'm like, no, I don't audition anyone. They brought in Eddie Braun, and John, my life changed forever. I had no idea what was going to happen to me from that point forward, but that was sort of the beginning of the journey. And we got to talking because he was just this humble, cool dude that like was so excited just to be doing these sort of really, in the hindsight, very lame stunts. Like I just needed to like slide the Mustang towards the lens, and he's like, that's a great idea. Meanwhile, I have no idea. He's been jumping the General Lee since he was 17. He was on the Fall Guy. He didn't say any of this stuff to me. So I'm like, all right. So we got talking, and one day he said, hey, I'm thinking about retiring. And I was like, oh, well, that's sad because you're really cool and you have great stories. Stuntmen have the best stories, by the way. And he said, well, let me tell you about my retirement plan. I'm like, okay. And we're having lunch. And he said, you know, I got into stunts. I've been doing it for 35 years, but I got into stunts because I met Evel Knievel as a kid. And you know, he inspired me to become a stuntman. He had this total Mean Joe Green Coca-Cola moment where he just was like this little kid in Pomona, and he meets Evel, and the crowd parts, and he's just like, here you go, kid. He gives him his autograph, and that just changed his life. And so after doing stunts for 35 years plus, he, you know, it's one of the jobs in industry that you can't do there's this time you're going to have to stop because the odds are you're going to get, you know, really injured. So he said, oh, what better way to go out than honor my childhood hero and try and finish this stunt that he tried to do in 1974. And I didn't know about the Snake River Canyon jump. I knew who Evel Knievel was. I knew about the toys. I remember going into Toys R Us, and his Mego dolls were right next to his, and my grandfather was saying, well, Spider-Man and Cap aren't real, but that guy was on Johnny Carson last night. I'm like, what? I'm like 2, like my mind, I'm not, you know, the whole fiction reality was really messing with me. And so I started doing some research on what this jump was, and it was the first pay-per-view ever in history. Vince McMahon, you know, broadcasted to all these theaters. They wound up rebroadcasting the next day on ABC on Wide World of Sports. But he wanted to essentially get a steam-powered rocket and jump across this canyon and safely land on the other side. And he spent the better part of the 70s promoting it, you know? So he kept saying he was going to do it. He's going to do it. And he said, Muhammad Ali's going to come. Everyone's going to be there. It's going to be this big celebrity fest. And he hired a founding father of NASA, a guy named Robert Truax, who helped design some of the Apollo rockets, like some of the stage rocket stuff. I think he worked on the bottom stage. And he also designed like the Thor missile system that would like launch out of, you know, subs in the 50s. Sure. And I've come to find out, you know, he was like a Navy rocket man. He debriefed Werner von Braun when we got him from the Nazis, you know, the sort of the godfather, the grandfather of rocketry. So this guy was not a slouch at all. So Evel did the right deal by hiring the right guy. The problem that happened in 1974 on this live pay-per-view was it was always going to be a crash landing no matter what. There's no way to elegantly land a steam-powered rocket. You can't control it or anything. So they had this parachute system in it. And what was going to happen was at some point he's going to pull this parachute, and that will, you know, have him land on the other side. But there was a malfunction on takeoff. So the rocket goes off, the parachute comes out on takeoff, and you can see, as you saw as a kid, like it goes over the canyon, but the drag from the parachute, because it opened up prematurely, kind of pulls him back.
Yeah.
And then he starts going into the river. And the problem is he's strapped in. He's going to drown. Like he's going to die. So everyone's like freaking out, watching him disappear behind the canyon. And because he's Evel Knievel, because he is some kind of weird mystical superhero who like heals quickly, he lands 2 feet to the side of the river on the riverbank. He's fine. He gets out, and it's just kind of like, all right, well, that happened, you know. But oddly enough, you know, much like these sort of legacy heroes, his career kind of spiraled after that. That was definitely his big peak, and then all kind of went downhill, unfortunately, for better or for worse. So, you know, Eddie's like, I got to pick this mantle up, and I want to finish out this mission. So he's telling me all this over lunch, and I'm just like, can I film that? Like, is somebody documenting this dude? Like, this is crazy. He's like, oh, do you want to? I'm like, please. So, we thought that this was going to be maybe a year-long thing. We started shooting. I was interviewing him. I got to know him. And there was this moment where it looked like Fox TV found out about this and said, we want to do a live event. We're going to broadcast this thing during the World Series. You're going to be famous. Can you have this rocket done in time by October? And he's like, yes. And so as his friend now, I'm really happy for him that he's going to be on this live event. But as this guy that's been kind of making this movie, I'm like, shit, here goes my ending. Like, it's just going to be broadcast on TV, and I guess I can turn the footage over, and here's some very emotional stuff with him and his family, and
Goddamn
spend
Fox.
some time working on it. And then I think what happened is someone at Fox finally realized that, oh yeah, he's going to probably die on live television, so let's not do this. And so at that point I was like, okay, I think the movie's back on.
That's cool. Yeah.
So and then that wound up going on for so that happened. And then it took 7 years to get this movie made. And because what happened was another network came aboard and also said the same thing. And like, hey, we want to do a live event. And then that same thing, I think the lawyers went, no, this is a really bad idea. We're not doing this. And so that fell through. And then for a very long time, John, I was like, maybe I'm making a film about a stuntman who is not going to complete the mission of his childhood hero and jump across the Snake River Canyon, because he put all his own money into building this ramp, and he put all his money into building this rocket. But right when things started to get dark, I had this real sort of epiphany. Like, obviously, I'm a giant comic book fan. I love superhero films. And, we didn't have any money. We were just a couple scrappy guys trying to make this movie. But I'm looking at everything we've been shooting, and I'm like, okay, hold on. I got a story of a guy who's trying to, complete the mission of his childhood hero. And the person building the rocket is the son of Robert Truax, a guy named Scott Truax, who he wants to prove to the world and avenge his father that his father's rocket would have worked and that it was a parachute malfunction. Because what happened, you'll see in the film, Robert Truax's obituary, despite being a founding father of NASA and all these wonderful accomplishments, it's just like New York Times. Yeah, the guy fucked up Evel Knievel's rocket died. So it's like, oh, that's his legacy. And he was trying to get us into space. He was trying to do like a citizens rocketry program. He's basically trying to do what Branson and all the billionaires are doing, but on a, working man's dime, trying to figure this thing out. So his son obviously had a motive too. So I started looking at the story, and I'm like, okay, and our hero is a guy that goes to work and he puts on a suit, and he wears a helmet, and he protects people, and he steps in when there's dangers. I'm like, oh my God, I'm making a superhero movie. Holy
Absolutely
shit.
You are.
And I'm
100%.
so fucking thrilled. This thing just went off, and that just motivated me to keep going and going and going and going. But our linchpin, I have to say, John, our executive producer, Julie Benson, who and is a fan of the show, she kind of helped get this thing going, because the whole thing echoed some of the sentiments that you talk about on the show a lot, which is, whether you're making comics or whatever, like, don't wait for people to hire you. You just got to make it. You just got to start. You just got to do, and like
Absolutely.
that method, that philosophy applies to all the arts. And in this case, making this movie, because what happened, I very naively, we did. Sorry, I'll just keep going. What happened is, we didn't know how this was going to end. I basically, you'll appreciate this. I basically filmed Bullet, but I didn't have the car chase. Okay, it's kind of interesting. It's a good character study. We're getting to know Steve McQueen. We understand he's a different kind of cop, and really, but we don't get the car chase. So this is an incomplete movie. So what we wound up doing is, and listen, I love Kickstarter. I think it's a very effective program, especially for creators who are doing comics. It didn't work for us. We tried to raise some cash to pay for, because up until that point, it was like me filming Eddie with the camera and the microphone. Do you remember that Dennis Miller, when he was doing SNL, he had a correspondent, the why is my name, Al Franken. And
Sure.
he was like a one-man roving reporter. He had like a satellite dish on his head, and he had a camera, and he's like this, and he's like, reporting live. I kind
Sure.
of felt like that, because like it was like me with this camera, this microphone, no money, going, hey, tell me more about the world of stunts. And but like that's not going to work on the day of the launch. Like, we're going to need a real crew. We're going to need a lot of cameras. We got one shot to get this take. So to kickstart everybody, and that didn't work out. And so then we like scraped together some money. We just begged, borrowed, and stealed, and got some cash to ultimately have Eddie complete this mission, but then be able to film it ourselves. Did not go live on Fox, did not go live on another network, but we got it, and it was thrilling to have this footage. But I put the sizzle reel together, and at this point, I naively think, oh well, we'll just pitch it around studios, and we'll show them this sizzle reel of this launch, which is rather impressive, and then they'll pay us to hire an editor and get all these finishing costs.
Sure.
Nope, not at all. The reaction was, hey, this is kind of good, but let us know when it's done. So then enter Julie Benson, I've known for a very, very long time, and she's like, hey, idiot, no one's going to pay you to finish your passion project. Like, what? That's just not how life works. And I'm like, really? But the sizzle reel is so good, and we went to Sony in a couple places, and she's like, no. Tell me the story. So, Julie, amongst other things, is an incredible writer. She's one of the greatest writers I know. But her Mozartian understanding of story structure, which, on this show, I think we get a sense of how good her movie trivia is, but you don't get a sense of just how good she is with story structure. And so I started telling her what this thing was about, and she's like, okay, well, that has to go there, and that has to go there, and I don't know what the fuck you have that scene in for. That's stupid. And so she was very helpful in the editing room, also because she didn't have the emotional baggage of the rest of us of having all this, like, but if we cut that scene, somebody almost died getting that shot. She said, doesn't matter, it's boring, take it out. I was like, okay, all right, So she was just just really helpful in shaping the story and getting it to where it was, an actual feature film. And the true test, because we kind of had it roughed out, it was feeling kind of good. And Eddie Braun, our star, he was the Cliff Booth to Charlie Sheen's Rick Dalton. He had been his right hand guy for a very long time, and similar stories. I mean, they didn't beat up Charles Manson's gang, but they did a lot of similar things from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. There's some very similar stories. And he calls me up. He's like, "Do you have a cut ready?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, come to Charlie Sheen's house. We're going to screen it." I was like, "All right, I guess this is what my life is now."
Wow.
Okay. And now, mind you, dude, I've been editing this, in my bedroom. Like, I'm trying to work a day job because, I phase out of commercials because I don't know if you know this, but once you stop doing something for a little bit to work on a passion project, they stop calling you, John. So I was just it was no one wants a commercial. Okay. So, I had to do a little other stuff to pay the bills. But anyway, so we go to Charlie Sheen's house to screen it, and I'm like, oh, this ought to be interesting. But were
the porn angels there when you showed it at Charlie's house?
This was post all that. Like this was like 2017, after he was kind of getting his life together.
Good.
And I have to say, dude, I have never been welcomed warmly into a stranger's house. This guy was like the nicest dude, and I was like,
that's nice to hear.
Clearly, I got him on a good night or whatever, but he was so nice. And so we sit down in the theater. And what was already playing was Apocalypse Now, which apparently is his favorite movie of all time.
His dad.
Because his dad. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. I don't know why I didn't make that connection. And I'm like, well, what? I mean, aside from your dad being in it, why did you love this movie so much? He's just like, because Dad had a heart attack twice, and he still killed Brando at the end. I'm like,
yeah.
That's kind of what happened.
I love that scene in Hot Shots when Charlie's on the boat and Martin's on the boat and they pass each other. They're like, "I loved you in Wall Street."
Yeah, so good. And he probably did all those stunts in Hot Shots and all that stuff.
It was amazing. No, and you're right. And you're right about the heart attacks too, man. No, that's Apocalypse Now the movie itself, and then everything that happened behind the scenes. It's like, oh my God, that Heart of Darkness documentary is amazing. And I watched the Redux when it was in the theaters. I mean, it's an incredible movie.
Yeah, the Redux was interesting because, Coppola introduces it and says, this is the version I've always wanted. I'm like, you made this movie yourself under no studio. Like, who were you? Who kept you from making this version? So anyway,
I didn't realize that.
I did apparently the theater chain was like, you can't have it this long. So
well, yeah, 3 hours. I mean, they want as many showings as possible. And of course now 3-hour movies are no big deal. So it's whatever.
Yeah, that actually tribute. That was the first surround sound movie ever made to Apocalypse Now.
I didn't realize that. That's oh my God, because I always thought it was like Earthquake, one of the disaster movies or something.
No.
Wow, cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So all right, so you're at Charlie's house.
Again, I hadn't played, like, Julie and I are the only two people that have seen this film. We were kind of like, I think it's okay, and she's like, it's fine, So we screen it, and it's very tense. It's very there's a lot of suspense leading up to the actual mission because I was there and I was freaked out, and the key to the success of this film is caring about Eddie. And I said this early on. I said, Eddie, this isn't going to work unless you let me into your home and we meet your family and the audience is rooting for you. Otherwise, you're just some guy gets in a rocket launched across the canyon. So at this point, like, we're all dialed in, and as we're prepping the scenes, prepping for the launch, Charlie just freaks out. Goes, stop the movie, stop. Like, whoa, what's going on? And he's like, I'm sitting next to Eddie in the audience. I got my arm around him. He's right here. But watching this, I'm still not convinced he's going to live through this experience. And I was just like, oh, fuck, I think we got something here. Like that was like, because, it's the suspension of disbelief. Like, it's a documentary. Like, you're going to easily just Google, is Eddie Braun still alive? Yes, no, and know the outcome. So the fact that, like, that was kind of working, really kind of, got us excited to finish it. And then the next wave is, okay, so now we still need money to finish this. You got to mix it. You got to think. Let's go back to Kickstarter. Oh, strike two,
Shit.
So it's okay. Again, can't say enough. There's nothing wrong with Kickstarter.
No, of course not.
It's
a gamble.
No, but it makes sense for creators who are doing comics because it's like you're just pre-ordering the book. I can understand how people are like, no, I'm not going to give money to your weirdo documentary about a guy who's watching that. That sounds like that's crazy. So, but anyway, so we scrapped together some more cash for finishing funds, and but then you have this problem of, okay, well, it's done, now what? It's like I started, I kind of cut my teeth in early 90s cinema where it's all these stories of, like, Kevin Smith and Tarantino all, like, scrapping together to do these independent films, and then hopefully someone swoops in and buys these things as festivals. So we're like, right. So let's try festivals, and, like, that everyone said no, and then
that they wouldn't invest in it, but you were able to show it at festivals, I'm assuming.
Yeah, because they take sort of works in progress, which is really helpful. So so not a single festival wanted it, and we're like, okay, but Charlie Sheen said it was good, so we were really kind of like just getting sadder and sadder because at this point, John, I poured everything into this, like every dime, every blood, sweat, tears, like it's just like every frame of that film. So I'm really getting kind of bummed. And the advice we got was like, well, you either need a festival, in the sense none of the festivals like you kind of need an executive producer to kind of help Godfather it in to possibly get it distribution. But it was all this advice was coming from, like, agents and managers, and there was this air of, like, but good luck with that. So,
no, of course, yeah.
And so, we got to thinking that, early on in one of the versions of this live event, Dwayne Johnson and his company was going to help with this second time it was going to be a live event. And we're like, should we check in with The Rock, see if he's still interested? And through happenstance, we screened this film early on for the stunt community because we wanted their blessing, because if this didn't fly with them, we're doomed, and so they all loved it, including this guy named Tunaway Reed, who was like, so emotional and thought it really spoke to what stuntmen go through to do this. And on top of the Odyssey, and he's just like, hey, my cousin's The Rock, I'd love to show this to him. And we're like, oh, because we were trying to get in touch with him anyway. It's probably better coming from you. So
sure.
he screened it for him and said, and Dwayne Johnson was like, oh, I totally remember. Like, whatever happened? Oh, they actually got this. So he saw the sort of incomplete version, but like to this like insane realization, he just like, I love it. How can I help? And so
wow,
that was just one of those moments where like, okay, this might be a happy ending for this horrendously difficult emotional filmmaking experience. And he got involved. He got his team on. They helped us get the finishing funds, and then they got us in the LA Film Festival. We're like, oh, look, finally we're going to have a festival. So we got to screen it with an audience, and we had enough money to mix it properly. So we had a proper 5:1 mix. And cool. It was just The Rock filmed an intro for it, like, which was just amazing. And this guy's the busiest man in the world. And he took, 5 minutes to like, welcome, this is the premiere. Don't try this at home. And so we're like, okay, great. Now we will find distribution. And according to the Hollywood story of Tarantino and all these guys, next will be a great movie deal. Nothing. And Jesus. I was like, oh shit. I was like, why is this, Julie, why is this so difficult? She's like, I didn't say it's gonna be easy. And and so we got a sales rep to help us sell it to films, and we would have these sure. weekly calls, which I called "Who Doesn't Like You This Week?" And the entire world passed, John. Like even companies that haven't even started yet. It's like, we don't want this movie. And so you start to go, oh, okay, this is weird. But and we did finally get like a bite from, I think maybe they do porn too. I don't know. It's like this no-name distribution company that was like, we'll take it. And like, so like, again, like you got like some Canadian television was like, oh yeah,
I was telling them about the show. Go on and we'll
cut up into 4 parts, turn into a series. Like, no, you can't do that. And I remember thinking it was like Christmas time, and I was like, man, we did everything right. Like I always hear about those stories, like, Matt Weiner and everyone that always talks about when they had a show like Mad Men, they went all over the thing. Everyone said no, and they finally got this thing. Like that seems to be the narrative. But I was like, well, that's not going to happen to us because we got The Rock, and it totally fucking happened to us. And so months go by, and like everyone's saying no, and then one day this agent calls up, and he's like, okay, well, you finally got a bite. Well, it's not a bite that they want it. I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking like, it's like, I don't know, this Czechoslovakian cable access thinks it's great. And they're like, well,
at least they landed somewhere.
Somebody, Walt Disney Company wants it. And to go from nobody, like nobody wanting to see it, to hearing this information. And this is like a year before they launched Disney Plus. Wow. So they're saying, hey, we're going to have this streaming service, and we'd love for this to be on it. And, we were like, what's the streaming service called? Disney what? Because it's, it was still very early on, and they were sure. kind of figuring this out. And so, it's just, the narrative that I'm happy that we're able to talk about is like, people may see it on Disney Plus, but like they bought an independent movie, like it was just a couple guys and Julie trying to like make this thing happen. And we got the greatest, action star to Godfather it. And then we finally got, an extremely wonderful distribution situation on Disney Plus. So all that to say is like, when John says, just start and do it, he's not lying. Like this wouldn't have happened if you just, and especially if Julie didn't say like, what the fuck you wait? No one's going to pay you to do this. Just start editing it yourself if you have to. And so, that's just the other thing. Like it's true. Like the system does eventually work. It took 7 years for this, but it does work eventually. And, if you just stick to it and you don't wait and you just keep going, the stuff will pay off. So
you got to believe in yourself, man. Yeah. You got to believe in the project, and you obviously did. And
I didn't believe in myself, but I believe in the project.
Well, there you go. All right. But no, honestly, no, man. And that's great, because you need that. Nothing will stop me from finishing this and getting it out there, because you knew you had something there, and that's great. And I'm again, I mean, I have nothing but love and respect for Julie. I mean, she's just a really smart person. She and Shauna, and I do love talking to them on the air and off the air, and they've really become good friends. And it's what I did, again, the PR people are like, hey, do you want to talk about Stuntman? It's like, sure. And maybe because I teased it, but Julie's like, oh, I'm the exec, or I saw that she was the exec producer on Twitter. And I'm like, hey, I'm talking to Kurt on Monday. And she's like, oh, yeah. She goes, yeah, well, I helped him shape the movie and everything. I'm like, fantastic. And The Rock, dude, so you got citizen astronauts out there in Bezos and, what Elon Musk and everything and what they're doing. But then also great timing because, Jungle Cruise is about to happen. And this intro that, is right at the front of the movie, there's Dwayne Johnson with his stuntman and everything. So that's great. And truly, the story of the stuntman, you're absolutely right. I'm a big fan of the Bond movies. And I love how in the bonus features of all the Bond movies, they take a lot of time to explain all the elaborate stunts that go on. And I don't know, because you've got several other great stuntmen in the movie. And one of the guys looked like a guy that maybe had worked on a couple of the Bond films. I wasn't sure. And I wish I could remember specifically. It was the guy who had 3 names.
Oh, Buddy Joe Hooker.
Yeah.
Buddy Joe Hooker worked on everything. Like
then.
Did you ever see Hooper?
Of course, the Burt Reynolds movie about stuntmen, and directed, of course, by the king of stuntmen, Hal Needham. And I certainly know my Hal Needham history. So what an incredible stuntman and filmmaker and everything. So yeah, I guess Billy Joe worked on Hooper and everything. He
did all the stunt driving, actually, and he actually jumped the rocket car. And all built up to that rocket car. That's him going across the ravine.
Wow.
And and that's the other thing too, that with this film is like, it's odd that we don't have an Academy Award column yet for stunts. And
makes no sense, man. I'm so with you. Yes.
Well, I mean, I think the argument is I think by nature of their work, they're supposed to be invisible. And, Eddie always says, I'm the face you never see. But when you really kind of listen and understand what they're actually doing in the process, you go, oh yeah, no, that's really important, and like when you listen to, when people talk about the making of those Bond films, like Roger Deakins, he's the cinematographer and their stunt coordinator. Those are the 2 most important people on the set that day working with the director, because a lot of times these stunt coordinators help previs and sort of flesh out what some of these sequences look like. So they're bringing a substantial amount to the table, So if they're giving awards for cinematography, like the sequence that's being done, again, the collaborative, obviously film's a collaborative medium and the director's in charge, but again, these guys bring ideas and help shape these things. And the other thing too, I was talking with Peter Rios on the Daily Rios, we were talking about too, is like, I met some of these stunt guys, and I think the reason why now it's almost embarrassing that we don't have it is it's sort of genre specific. I mean, obviously when an Academy Award for Best Costume, it's probably a period piece, it's like a period drama, because you can really flex your muscles with the artistry. And now with the emergence of superhero films, there is so much stunt work being done, both from a sequence standpoint, like there's so many fight sequences in superhero films, but just from the stunt work itself. I met Aaron Toney, the guy who's Anthony Mackie's stunt double. And, I was looking at he was showing me some of the previs and sort of behind the scenes stuff of what he's working out, sort of figuring out what Sam Wilson's fight style is. And it's sort of like, oh, wow, like these characters that we love, like they're kind of have a duality now. Like Anthony Mackie's doing all the acting, but a lot of that fighting is Aaron. And like these guys are humble. We'll never admit that. We'll never take more credit than they're due, because they're incredible, committed craftsmen. But you got to say, like, there's a point where you're like, some of these characters are half actors and half stuntmen at a certain point. And
no question.
You just gotta acknowledge that at a certain point. And I think it's important to them also. I think it's just letting the Academy understand and educate them that, hey, again, we're talking about Bullet, like that whole car chase scene, that was coordinated and planned out by the stunt drivers. Obviously, they storyboard it and they talked about the director, but a lot of the execution and some of the happy accidents that happened, that was the birth of a stunt sequence. And it got an Academy Award for Best Editing, but like, it should have gotten the Best Academy Award for stunt coordination. So
you are so right, man. Zoe Bell, who doubled for Uma Thurman in the Kill Bill movies.
Yeah.
Is it Scott Frank, the stuntman that he's become kind of a red box, B movie action hero? I believe it's Scott. I know it's Scott something, and I mean, if it's not Scott
Frank's the guy who wrote the chess movie with the girl that just came out.
Oh, sure, Queen's Gambit. Yeah.
So he's not a very good stuntman.
All right, clearly not. But I'm blanking on the guy's name. But yeah, he's another great stuntman that has now become an actor of these B movies and stuff, and that's great. Or Don Wilson, Don the Dragon Wilson did a lot of stunt stuff, and obviously great martial arts actor and everything. But no, you're absolutely right about that. And also, given the direction that theater movies are going into, where if it's not a horror movie or a franchise movie, good luck being in the theater.
Yeah.
I absolutely think there's now more than ever a real imperative to get a real, best stunt coordination, however you want to do it. If it's the company, the production crew, or the stunt people themselves, I'm absolutely for that. And I think you're right. Because they're doing the heavy lifting in these movies and need to be acknowledged. But also, as you say, the invisibility thing. I mean, you can't tell from this picture of Eddie, but God, he really did look like Tom Cruise, and that clearly had to help him in his career. I don't know did he do Cruise movies?
Well, Tom Cruise does his own stunts now, so he actually doesn't really need a guy. He doubled for a lot of guys, but like I said, most notably was Charlie Sheen. But he doubled for, but it's really crazy. Connie, one of the other stuntmen, he doubled for Warren Beatty for a very long time. Wow. And if you look at him just the right way, I'm like, yeah, you're Warren Beatty.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And but no, like I said, the other thing too, a lot of it didn't make it to the movie because, I was trying to make it focused about Eddie, but like these other sort of elder statesmen, the reason why another box that checked was these guys, the way they hung out and the way they worked and the way they trained, they were sort of the elder statesmen that worked and trained the new generation, I'm like, this is the Justice Society of America, guys. Like Julie's the only one to gut that, but I'm just like, this is the fucking JSA. Like,
you're right,
they like, it's like Jay Garrick and Ted Grant. Like, okay, new guys, here's what you got to do, because that's how it worked. They train these guys at a young age, and they get to a certain point where like, okay, I think you're good enough to go out and fight crime now. So we'll let you see how you go. And they kind of like ease Eddie into these kinds of things, and that kind of vibe, was grooving on me too, because I was just like, this again. I'm like, I'm making a superhero movie. I'm so thrilled. But you saw the original launch back in the day, then?
I did. Cosell was doing the play-by-play.
What?
I believe, or if not, it was Jim McKay or whatever. And I'm sure it might be on YouTube. I was going to ask if that Knievel, TV movie or Backdoor Pilot, if that's on YouTube. I don't know, because I remember a movie. There was the George Hamilton Evel Knievel movie, and then there was another kind of movie of the week. If it was Sam Elliott, maybe it was his pre-mustache beard days, because
he had no mustache. Yeah.
Well, that, like when he was on Mission Impossible and he's clean cut and everything, and looks like another California good-looking leading man and everything. Yeah. But I don't know. I'm gonna have to see, because I do remember that, and as you say, it's like Crooked Circus Guys or whatever. It absolutely was that plot, just like that. Those two Captain America movies that Red Brown made back in the 70s. Of course, man, absolutely. So no, that's amazing, dude. So yeah, I listen, it's great, and I really think, again, linking it to the obvious of what's going on now with Bezos and Elon Musk and all these, and Richard Branson and everything, doing their suborbital flights, and really that true story of Bob Trox and what he wanted to do with the original Sky Cycle. And great newspaper flash of his obit, where literally the quote was, his dream of bargain basement spaceships never materializes. and leaving the schematics for another attempt. He wanted to do it again, and to have his son Scott, fulfill his dream. I mean, that's the thing. It's a really, really good story. And as Sheen said, holy shit, I'm watching this and like, is he gonna make it? Because I vaguely maybe remember that he was going to attempt it, Eddie was going to try to attempt it, but I didn't remember if he succeeded or failed. And also, I wanted to ask, Robbie Knievel, was he aware of your project? And if so, what was he cool with it? Was he like, hey, back off? Because certainly he's been trying to maintain his father's legacy and all.
Yeah, the only Knievel we dealt with was Kelly Knievel, the other son. And I think at the time of I think Robbie, always had plans to do it, but as you learn in the movie, like launching a rocket over a canyon is no easy feat. Like just the logistics, Eddie, because Eddie just was on a mission, he poured everything into it. And, just like leasing the land on the landing side on both things, building this ramp, finding people who could, build this rocket, like a lot had to be done. So if, finding someone independently who is just as passionate to build it and do it, for Robbie, you don't find those people. So, and Eddie learned too, like he was trying to find investors and stuff to even lease the land and build a rocket. He couldn't find anybody either. So long story short, Robbie did give his blessing, because I think,
good.
Unless he had the means to do it himself, which he didn't, because nobody does, it wasn't, it was just not going to happen. But Kelly was really cool. He he gave us some rare footage that no one saw, for the thing, and he was there on the day of the launch. And there's a scene in the movie where he still has the original Sky Cycle and wheels it out. It's just like, it's like looking at like the smashed Batmobile that had to get redone. Like it was just really quite a powerful moment. And here's a guy whose father was an action figure. Like, he had his own toy line. It was just rather interesting and stuff. So
amazing, man. That truly. No, honestly, it's such an interesting story. Also, as we mentioned, the canyon itself, the community had to kind of approve this, because apparently Evel wasn't like the best neighbor to the citizens of the area in terms of, first of all, and I can appreciate it from everything from a Dead concert to an Indy 500 infield, that a lot of yahoos like showed up and probably like trashed the area.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, do you mind if I shoot this rocket across your canyon and land in your, near your land, and probably have a lot of looky-loos showing up and probably crapping on your lawns and leaving their trash and just being jerks and everything. And it's like, so it was really cool seeing Eddie kind of broker with the community and really kind of like hat in hand and go, hey, I really want this to be as respectful as I possibly can make it. And and also, as you said, showing his family, I think, was really great, because it really does show the humanity and really the sacrifice that he's been doing with his career. God, and especially all these other stunts that you show of him rolling over several times. And at one of those, was he bleeding from the head? Because I know like guys come to pry him out of this police car, and I forget what sequence it was from. And they're like, Eddie, just stay still. He's like, no, I'm okay. And I've been concussed. Back in college, I hit a pothole that flew over my handlebars and hit the pavement hard with my face, and had this nasty like cut under my chin. And I was definitely concussed. And you're like, immediately your reflexes are, no, I'm okay. Everything's fine. Okay. Yeah. It's like, you just had a concussion. Just sit still. And my girlfriend at the time is like, will you please just sit down? The doctor said you shouldn't be running around. I'm like, no, I'm fine. Really, let's go to the mall. And she's like, just sit next to me. I'm like, all right, sorry.
Let's not slip by that you had a girlfriend while you also had a bike. That's a rare combination.
It was a bicycle. It wasn't a
bicycle. But I'm saying that's
I was
pretty good.
That's
amazing.
It was college.
Amazing.
It was college, okay. Man.
That was good.
What are you going to do? So you had to get around, man. So no, I had my bicycles.
Well, that's another eye-opening thing, man. Like the first day I worked with Eddie on a thing, there was this stunt where some kid was on a surfboard and he's going to fall onto the ground, and the guy shows up, the stunt kid's ready to go, and I'm like, whoa, where's the pads? Where's the thing? He's like, oh, don't worry about it. This guy's he knows how to land. I'm like, he's gonna get hurt. And Eddie's like, oh yeah, it's gonna hurt. Just try not to do too many takes. And like my mind just blew at that point. I'm like, what? He's like, oh yeah, we get hurt all the time. And that was another reason I wanted to show this portrait. And because, when we watch Hollywood films, we kind of just assume like, oh, this is scripted. This is fake. No one's really getting hurt.
Nothing but protection for the people shooting.
Whatever.
Yes.
They get hurt all the time.
Wow.
They get injured. God forbid, some of them even die, but it's not out of recklessness. It's not out of, ill planning. Just sometimes the law of averages, if you're doing this kind of job this many times, chances are you're going to get hurt. Like, for instance, the film opens with this stunt called a cannon roll. And a cannon roll is something that was devised post Hal Needham around the time where if you wanted a car in camera to sort of flip over without putting a ramp, because, once you see a ramp, like it kind of gives the gag away. So they go, oh, we figured out how to do this. What we do is we put a bomb in the trunk of the car and we wire it up to the dashboard. So the stunt driver will, drive the car, turn it, hit his mark, and then activate the bomb, which will then explode and then launch the car in the air and then roll over and roll over and roll over and roll over. And like, there's a guy in there. Like everyone's like, well, we have driverless vehicles. It's like, well, until there's a stunt setting, you're going to have to still have these guys like Eddie driving these cars, because you need to make sure it's like an actor hitting his mark. You need to make sure the car hits the lens in the right way. And then he always said, like, at the end of the stunt, the first thing you train is you take your foot off the gas and take the keys out, because in case it doesn't land upside down and it lands wheels correctly, it might speed off into the crew. So they have to, like, even though they're rolling around and flying around, they got to go, okay, when this ends, I got to make sure the keys are out, all this kind of stuff. So that's what pros they are. And so long story short, I said, he was about to do this cannon roll and say, can I put some GoPros in this? Can we kind of, see what that, and the footage comes back and it was like a NASA experiment gone wrong. I'm like, holy shit. This is what you do for a living? It's like, oh yeah, I'm fine. But yeah, that was the thing. He was clearly as he says, got his bell rung. So that's just like another thing I hope people see is like, these guys really put it on the line. Again, they're not crazy. They just love movies and love making movies as much as guys like us who love talking about movies. They're just as excited about it. They just decide to, when the hero needs to jump off of a bridge, they'll do it themselves, And again, they love making movies. And that's what I found so charming about it. Because you look at the Hal Needham movies and Burt Reynolds, you go, oh, these are just like tough guys that smoke cigars and get in bar fights at a moment's notice. And it's not them. It's not that at all. Sure, they're a little tougher than the average bear, but they're professional and they care and they're it. There's a famous stuntman named Dar Robinson. Okay. And he created the decelerators. So when you leap out of a building, there's this pulley system that slows you down before you splat on the ground. And they tried it out for a Burt Reynolds film called Stick, and he plays the bad guy. And Eddie was on that set, and he just said to the director, "Promise me you'll still use the shot even if I die." It's just like, wow. Okay, Jesus. This is Eddie said the same thing. He's like, if I die, please finish this movie. Like, try not to make it too gory, just kind of, and that was like another emotional thing of like, at this point I'm making this movie, but Eddie's now a friend. Like I got to know him very well over the time. And so of course I'm like, is this a good idea to do this? Like, and so like the day of the launch, I'm like freaking out. I feel like it's a funeral for a guy who hasn't died yet, and so it was just all sorts of crazy emotions. This is very, John, I say it's been very therapeutic talking to you about this. It was my own Hearts of Darkness,
I understand it, but now this is the great thing. You can seriously watch the feedback of people watching this now, and I hope it's getting good feedback. When did it debut? It dropped last week, am I right?
It dropped on Friday.
It was last Friday, okay.
Yeah. So it's been up there for a few days, and it's just been surreal with that TV behind me. I knew it was going to be up, and I'm like, oh, where is it? And I'm like flipping through the banners, and there's Loki, there's Hamilton, there's The Simpsons, and then I see this, and I'm like, oh my God, it actually happened. Jesus. Yeah, and I had a little bit of a panic attack, but then I was okay.
No, man. You got nothing to worry about because, again, this is really, I think, where the interest in movies is this kind of action. And you take us behind the scenes and you tell us this incredible story about Eddie and about Scott, the son of the original Sky Cycle designer. And boy, not only the successes, but also the failures along the way in terms of dry runs and things like that. And also just the audacity of a steam engine being powerful enough to take these guys over the canyon. Because you've got this great swooping shot from like in motion before we get to the edge of the canyon and then across it and everything. And that's, Evel Knievel's original ambition was, I'd like to jump over the Grand Canyon. And it's like, yeah, good luck, man. And Snake River's like, well, it's smaller. And it's like, yeah, it's still really big, man. It's really a hell of a maw. And it's like, yeah, I don't think that's easy either. And truly, I mean, that's the thing. You really show the danger and the just the expanse of how big of a challenge this is. And yeah, it's a great success story, but it will absolutely grab you if you haven't seen it yet, and can't recommend it enough. I mean, truly, I'm really excited. But I'm interested in what you've got coming up next now. And again, I want you to rest. Although it's been a year since you made the movie, but you were telling me off the air something you're in the midst of making right now with a pretty cool collaborator.
Yeah, there was I listening to your show, a lot of the creators that come on are like loath to say like, oh, pandemic was fun. I was very busy. I got all this stuff to do. I'm a freelance guy. I work at home. I had a similar experience because the first part of the pandemic, we were finishing up we actually made the movie longer for Disney. Like it wasn't as, they actually said, oh, can you put some more family stuff in there? They didn't change anything. And so we added some more stuff, and to their credit, it was the way to go. But just to answer your question about the feedback, I'm getting a lot of messages from strangers who said they were moved to tears and never tried a documentary before. And I was just like, oh, that's really, I'm happy to hear that, because like, it's an emotion. It's an unexpectedly emotional story. That is what I think that the takeaway is. Again, because you think stuntman, this is going to be some tough guy. And no, it's a very vulnerable man who tries something that no one's tried to do before. And you see fear for the first time in his face and his elder statesman. But so we finished that during the pandemic, and then our co-producer Rob Wilson he helped us also with the finishing stuff. He has a lot of experiences making documentaries, unlike Julie and Eddie and Steven and I were like, he's like, guys, let me help you finish this. So cool. He has been Oliver Stone's documentary producer for a very long time. I don't know if you remember, Oliver did the Putin interviews and south of the border, like interviewed had this whole series where he was interviewing like Castro and stuff. And Rob produced that in the Untold History of America.
Love that series. That series. It was fantastic.
Yeah, it's good. So he's sort of the driving force of all this, and he really kind of had this idea like of doing a spiritual sequel to JFK, the 1992 film that Oliver Stone did, sort of not like a documentary spiritual sequel. And they had been gathering all this information, and they asked if I wanted to co-produce and edit the whole thing. And I was like, I mean, the intimidation factor of, working with one of my cinematic heroes made me kind of a little bit reluctant. But then just the whole thing of like, man, do I want to, with all the COVID, want to deal with like this horrendous assassination of this president? So I was a little like,
depressing.
So he started sending me footage and, had all this other stuff. And I learned so much about this that I didn't know from the 92 film. And that's another thing too. Like, I don't have kids, but if I did, I'd be like, if you want to know about something, make a documentary about it. Like, I knew nothing about stuntmen, the stunt community, or Evel Knievel, and now that. And so, what's fascinating about JFK, which I didn't know, and stop me if you heard the story before, but after his assassination, obviously they had the Warren Commission come together. They spent a year or two investigating it. They published this report, much like the Mueller report, where they're like, it's just a lone gunman. No, nothing to see here. We checked all the evidence. We met all these witnesses. That's that. And the people at the time are like, are you sure? Like, again, are you sure there was no collusion? Because it seemed like, okay, but they all kind of just went, all right. And then the fascinating thing that happened, which I didn't know, is about 6 months later, much like the Mueller report, they decided to release this 12-volume book set, which was all the evidence and stuff they gathered.
No.
So people could read along and go, huh. And a lot of it was redacted. A lot of it was obviously classified. So as much of the witness statements that were taken were published. And that was sort of what Jim Garrison, Pa Kent in the movie, that's what he's looking at. He's like,
right, the New Orleans, the New Orleans prosecutor that's trying to figure it out. Absolutely.
So many years go by and we accept this thing. And I don't know if you know this, but the most iconic piece of evidence is the Zapruder film. When you say, like, when you think JFK assassination, you think the Zapruder film coming down.
The home movies that Zapruder was making, just innocently seeing the president's motorcade pass by.
Yeah.
And go on.
That's the thing we immediately think about. Here's the crazy thing that I didn't learn until working on this movie. That got buried and the American public never saw that film. So when you take the word of this committee and say he was shot from behind, and that's fine, you go, okay, cut to 1975 on the Geraldo Rivera show at night.
Saw it.
He's there with Robert Grodin, who like stole this film, and Dick Gregory, and they're like, okay, let's look at this thing. And I'm curious to hear your reaction, because you could hear in the studio audience, everyone just like, what the fuck?
Yes. Yeah. This show was called Good Night America.
Back and all that stuff. Like, no one saw this. And so we were told he was shot from behind. And so everyone just freaks out. Like, what was that like seeing that? I'm so fascinated to hear.
Dude, I was 10 years old and I had a 5-year older or 7-year older stepbrother. And he's like, we're watching this. And I'm like, okay. And oh my God. I mean, you see the shot. It clearly looks like it's coming from the front.
Yeah.
And as opposed to Al Capone's vaults, which Geraldo is notorious for, here was an actual piece of investigative journalism that he was part of, that it was like, this was shocking as hell. Tons of disclaimers. Thank God our parents weren't paying attention to what I was being exposed to. I didn't become postal, so I think I'm okay. But no, it was insane to watch this footage. And yeah, you're right about that. And that, and truly, I love that. I mean, the iconic scene to me in JFK is when Donald Sutherland is sitting on the bench with Costner and everything, Jim Garrison's character, and laying out the whole coup d'etat. This is how they kind of planned it and stuff. And Colonel Prouty, right? The real guy that X, as Sutherland calls himself in the film, is based on. I've watched several of those, and I am not a dogged Kennedy conspiracy hunter.
Yeah.
But the subject has come up in my life several times. I was telling you off the air. We made this. There was a show that the guys who produced Brad Meltzer's excellent shows, Decoded and Lost History, they made a show called The Unexplained, not to be confused with William Shatner's show. And this is where as we were saying, it's like it's only been shown in Canada and Germany, never made it to America because Go Lucky, the production company, got absorbed by another company, and they're like, yeah, we don't care about this. So it never hit American television. But anyway, the Kennedy conspiracy, they came to me and they're like, hey, do you have any like weird, conspiracy kind of stories? Because I had done Prophets of Science Fiction for them. And like, can't be a ghost story, can't be aliens. I'm like, all right. I'm like, well, there was always that Chicago connection to Kennedy's assassination. Jack Ruby being part of Giancana's mob before he went down to Dallas. And they're like, oh, Kennedy's always great. And they uncovered and got me reading about this attempt to assassinate Kennedy 2 weeks before Dallas. He was going to come to town to watch an Army-Navy football game at Soldier Field on a Saturday. And they found two different suspicious people. One was a John Birch Society guy who was going to work on Saturday, even though his plant was closed. And they searched his car and they found rifles and ammunition. And there were two Hispanic guys that had no identification on them, but they had a map of the motorcade plan, and they had rounds of ammunition and rifles. So they were all like taken in for questioning by the Chicago branch of the Secret Service. And according to the conspiracy theory, where we got back to Washington, hey, Chicago's too hot, cancel the trip. Conveniently, in real life, the South Vietnamese president was assassinated that day. That was the cover. So, all right, you've heard all this as well.
It's in the movie, buddy.
Oh, I'm so excited to see it. Oh my God.
That's all it's in.
That's excellent, man. So yeah, so that's my little moment of investigation. It as they called it, Plan B, and Plan C was Dallas. I forget if or was it Plan A?
Miami. So okay. I'm glad. So again, like you, I'm not a conspiracy nut. I and also like conspiracy theory means so much. Has so much different context now. In a lot of ways. Sure. JFK was sort of the big bang of all that, and it's 100% sort of weird. And
yes,
so that was another reason I was loath to do it. But another thing about your show is this time last year, you guys kept talking about Columbo over and over and over again. And one day I was like, "All right, fine, I'll watch it." And I started with the Spielberg one, the Bochco one, and I was hooked ever since. So as I'm getting this thing, I was like, "Oh, I can," a documentary editor has a slightly different job than a regular editor. And, I kind of felt like Columbo. Like I just basically got dumped all this evidence. And so I got to kind of like construct this narrative because the premise of the whole thing, which I'll get to, is so anyway, sorry, that's a hot spot as a cinematographer.
Oh, don't worry, man. I understand that, dude.
Sorry, that's going to drive me fucking crazy.
That shit happens. Don't worry about it.
There you go. There we go.
There you go. That's a little better.
So now we just got a J.J. Abrams flair here. So the Geraldo Rivera thing happened, and the government had to form the House Select Committee on Assassinations because, much like you, everyone was like, "Guys, I think you lied to us," and they're like, "Okay, well, we're going to reinvestigate this in the 70s." And so they form this whole committee, and they start re-interviewing witnesses and start talking to CIA guys and all this kind of stuff. And what they learned was like, oh shit, we can't let people see this. We're going to keep this classified into the year 2029. So it's just like, okay, that's weird. Is everyone okay with that? And that was it. And so then cut to 92, Oliver Stone's film comes out, reintroduces the interest. For the first time, a movie helped pass a congressional law. Again, this was all news to me. I missed all of this as a film student, but they were forced that Congress had to pass the JFK Records Collection Act in the early 90s because of the direct result of the popularity of Oliver Stone's film. He testified on Congress. And so what that did was like, hey, we're not waiting until the year 2029. We're declassifying stuff now. So they formed this the Assassination Records Review Board, the AARB, and they wind up declassifying 5 million pages of documents. So all this redacted stuff that they couldn't talk about or release, all that comes out, and they have it housed like the National Records in College Park, Maryland, and it's open to the public. So since the 90s, like enthusiasts just go and they research and they do, and like a lot of stuff has been learned through this Records Collection Act. And so this film is basically okay, spend 20 years. We now know a lot more than back in the 60s. So here's what we've learned. Here's now we're going to much like Columbo, we're going to just look at this case. We're going to just put all the facts. And again, the thing that I want to stress is that everything in this movie is backed up from an actual document that got declassified. Okay. The days of like, I wonder if it was this or that. It's like, no. Like everything in this is like, this guy said this person said this, here's the proof, this was buried for 30 years, and go. And so a lot of people ask me, the first question is, so is there a smoking gun? And no, of course not. But all these little pieces, John, add up to a picture of a giant fucking smoking gun. And it's I don't know when it's coming out here. It was at Cannes, and it premiered there, and now they got distribution, so that should be coming out now. But again, it's like this very fascinating look at all the stuff. But the Chicago plot that you talked about, not only was it a play-by-play sort of handbook of what went down in Dallas, they even had a patsy ready to go, a guy named Arthur Valley, who was worked for the CIA at a certain point, much like Oswald, was like an ex-military guy, just like Oswald, was like allegedly like a lone nut guy who like publicly said stuff he didn't like the president.
Yeah.
They move him from New York to Chicago and get him a job in a building that's much like the book depository building.
Right.
And there were a landlord in Chicago called the FBI and said, "Hey, I just rented a room to 2 Cuban guys who have guns, and they got a map of the city. This is kind of weird." And so the Secret Service botched the surveillance of these guys, and they couldn't catch him. And they got Valet, but he was just gonna be the Oswald in this situation. But what we learn in this movie is one guy, this one bodyguard, one Secret Service guy, the only African American to be a Secret Service guy, Mr. Bolden.
Yep,
he was
Mr. Bolden, absolutely.
by Kennedy.
Yes.
And he was like, this is some fucked up shit, man. And he tried to alert everyone in Dallas that, like, hey, just be aware. I don't know if we should be doing these motorcades. And he totally, like in a bad X-Files episode, got arrested on this petty crime and railroaded and like silenced. And it's just like, again, all these things add up. It's like, guys, this doesn't feel right. It's like more so than before. Because again, this is all fact now. This is all documented stuff. This is no longer like guys in their basement, like the lone gunman on X-Files. This is like, real stuff. Wow, word balloon's getting weird now. We got to get back to comics.
No, this is great because truly, I interviewed Abraham Bolden. That was one of the things John,
you should have been in this movie.
Dude, I wish. Literally, the only way I got footage of the finished episode was it was playing in Canada, and one of my friends who listens to the show set up his iPhone and recorded the screen of the TV as it was playing. That's the only footage I have because truly, after they made the show, the production company got swallowed by this bigger production company, and even the producers, they left the company like, we don't have access to the footage. We'll let you know when it runs somewhere. And then they're like, hey, it's running in Canada this day. I'm like, okay. And then, hey, it's running in Germany this day. I'm like, all right, great, whatever. But yeah, man, Abraham Bolden. So we're sitting down at the Green Mill.
This is classic Suntress. You pull out something that like no one's heard on the 15, 16 years of listening to this. You always bring up these little nuggets. Turns out you interviewed Abraham Bolden. Please continue, sir. I just want to point this out. You do this. This is a classic Suntress.
I swear, man, I've had this Forrest Gump like career of weird just happenstance that I meet people and I get these opportunities. But we're at the Green Mill, this great jazz club in Chicago that goes back to the Capone era. Yeah. And they shot it like The Godfather. And it's us just sitting in a booth talking and stuff.
Awesome.
And yeah, Mr. Bolden was amazing. And I'm glad did you get him for the thing, or has he passed away? I mean, I know he's very old.
Passed away, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
We had someone who knew about the thing, but like, I'll be honest with you, had I known this, I would have been like, Mr. Stone,
I would have told you.
I got the guy. So do you recall what he told you firsthand?
Yes. Well, like you said, he got busted for this ridiculous, like he was passing $5 counterfeit bills in the north suburbs. Very affluent and very few black people living there at the time.
Yeah.
And it just was so like, really, that's going on? And he claimed they took him, they put him away for a while. They're like, he says that they injected him with some sort of LSD or some other psychotropic. And he said to me, he goes, as they were holding him down to give him the injection, they're like, not only are you going to not remember this experience, you're going to remember a fucking thing when it comes to the Kennedy stuff that you're talking about. And it's like, okay, that's fascinating. Yeah. What do you say to that? My God, I was so not prepared. I mean, I did the best I could and I asked the questions that I could, but I am no Peter Falk. I am no Lieutenant Columbo, but it was amazing.
I'm still in Columbo mode. So hearing this, I'm just like, oh man, just, we gotta redo the movie. But what's nice is like, there's now documents that he wrote a memo saying like, guys, like there's some weird stuff going on. And one of the HSCA witnesses he had interviewed the head of Secret Service at the time
in Illinois.
He said, he asked if he had ever met Abraham Bolden, and this guy just like, who are you working for? And he put his gun on the table, and he's just like, we got him, we got that guy. So like he was like a hot button topic with these retired guys. So yeah.
No, and also like Mr. Bolden said that the Secret Service was incredibly racist back then.
Oh yeah,
and
only African American to be on the Secret Service.
Right, and met Kennedy at a fundraiser after the election, and it's like, oh, you're in Illinois. Do we have any black Secret Servicemen in Washington? And he's like, I don't know, sir. And he goes, well, let's see what we can do about that. And the next thing you know, Mr. Bolden got invited to go to D.C. And he said he'd come back to his desk in the morning and there'd be cartoons of like terribly drawn, stereotypically drawn black people, or a noose on his desk, he claimed one time. And I don't doubt it. I mean, but he said it was such heavy persecution that he's like, the hell with this. I'm going to go back to Chicago. At least I can deal with it there. And as you said, he was really, screaming like, hey, we should really look into this, and was completely ignored. And as you say, the guy who was in charge, they shredded everything. They shredded all the evidence they collected about those two Cubans. And Valley, they still had that stuff on. And like I said, he was a John Birch conservative back then. And kind of like Frank Whaley's character in JFK, sitting in the diner like, hey, somebody ought to put a bullet in Kennedy's head. And they had that kind of reputation. And that's why his landlady or whatever is like, hey, you got to check this out. Some weird shit's going on. So yeah, fascinating stuff. And I'm so excited to see this. And you got to come back when you're ready with the movie. Bring Oliver if you can.
I absolutely will. He's an interesting guy. Like
I can't imagine. Please tell me.
His mind he knows all of this stuff. So when we're showing him rough cuts, he's just like, what about the guy George Joannides, the CIA contact who was with the HSCA? And I'm like, how do you? Okay, we can put that in. Like he just like it's like, I guess when you're obsessed with a case for as long as he is, you're going to retain some information. But there is a conclusion to this. There is I don't want to give it away, but there's definitely like, okay, this is probably exactly what happened, and that's very, very unnerving. And we'll leave it at that. But getting back to comic books, man, oh man, Evel Knievel had a comic he had a one shot that came with his toy line for a while. And funny comic book story too is, did you ever read Team America, John? In
the Marvel
80s?
Book. Yeah.
The Marvel book. Do you know the origins of that comic book?
No.
So this is a deep dive for you. I got into comics around 82, 83, and I had these toys called Team America, not the Trey Parker,
the movie,
the movie, but this was like
the Thunderbird parody. Absolutely, yes.
These were toys where it was like guys that kind of looked like Captain America. They were on a motorcycle. You put in the thing, you wind it up, and then and then it goes. And everyone's like, "Oh, those are Evel Knievel toys. Like that's Evel Knievel." Like, no, it's Team America. And I remember like getting in a fight with an older neighborhood kid, and I'm like, no. So it turns out that yes, they were exactly the Evel Knievel toys. But what happened is the Ideal Toy Company, which made a fortune on the Evel Knievel toys, they were expanding the line. Like they made the Escape from Skull Island playset, which was strange. It was like Evel Knievel with a jetpack, and it was really like, I wasn't sure the toy narrative that was being tied together. But and there was an actual Sky Cycle toy too. And so it's like, Evel Knievel is the bravest toy salesman that has ever lived. Like he just like they had the action figure and the toy before he even jumped the canyon. But anyway, after the Snake River Canyon, his publicist that was running the whole thing asked him if he could do a sort of tell-all book about the whole Snake River experience, and he said, yeah, sure. And he had an audio tape, he had evidence, and his name is Shelley Saltman, and the book comes out and definitely portrayed an off-brand version of Evel Knievel, because up until this point, he was say no to drugs, kids,
sure.
No matter what, get back up on that bike and keep going. Like he was at that time, like a great role model and hero. Agreed. And so it was very alarming to see this book come out that's very salacious and talking about the Hells Angels that were the security there. That's why the people in Twin Falls didn't really want it to go again, because they just trashed the place. But he decides to wait for Shelley Saltzman at his office at Fox Studios for him to come out, and he beats him with a crowbar, and he gets put into jail. And the Ideal Toy Company went, well, we got good news and bad news. Good news is the Sky Cycle sold very well. Bad news is we can't sell any more toys now because you're in jail.
Yeah, no shit.
It's like you can't sell an action figure. So that whole thing fell apart, and Ideal Toy Company was just like, well, what the hell are we going to do with all of this? And they went to Marvel Comics and said, we have this toy that we got to rebrand and repackage. Can you help us? And I think it was Roy Thomas right before he left for DC. I'm not sure, but some editor was like, all right. And they like came up with Team America. And that was basically an exercise in saving a toy line that needed rebranding. And I fell for it. I bought the comics, and it was kind of in the 616 because I think Ghost Rider appeared in one issue and Iron Man appeared in one. But so in a weird way, Evel kind of was part of my early comic collection in a very strange roundabout way.
That's hilarious. Do you know? I'm assuming you know that Netflix show The Toys That Made Us.
Oh yeah.
Do you know Brian Volkweiss, the producer?
I don't. Our paths were on similar trajectories because we both needed footage of the Rock during COVID. He was doing the behind the attractions the same time when we were doing some enhancements to Stuntman for Disney, and we were both on an email chain trying to figure out so how do we do this? How do we get in the middle of a pandemic and a lockdown, get this stuff? And they sorted it all out, fortunately. But
that's good because I was going to say that Dwayne Johnson has really been like this angel for both your project and Brian's, and believe me, Brian said the same thing where it's like The Rock calls me up and is like, "Hey, I really love Toys That Made Us. You want to do this Disney behind the scenes of the various like rides and the Imaginarium kind of." I forget what the Disney term is for that stuff. And, he's like, yes. Yes, please. Can I make a TV show?
That sounds like a plan. Yeah. I haven't watched it yet. I hear it's really good, though.
I haven't watched it yet either. And actually, I didn't even know that it was already out. I always, Brian's PR people when he has something new, they usually are like, hey, if you want to talk to Brian, last time we talked about, he did this great show during the pandemic called A Toy Store Near You. Yeah,
I love that. I watch it because I heard him on your show, the Amazon.
Oh, that's cool.
And I started following all those toy stores on Instagram and stuff because I'm just like, I might want to do my G.I. Joe collection at some point. It's good to know who to call when I decide to pull the trigger on that.
There you go, man. And Bill Hicks, the comedian that passed away young in the early 90s. I'm a comedy nerd, and he got the estate of Bill's mother and Bill's brother. Yeah. And they're just making a ton of they've already made a great documentary about his life, but they have all this, it's like Tupac, where Bill Hicks has all this unreleased material of Bill doing stand-up. And he's like, oh, we're making specials, we're making comedy albums. I'm like, that is fantastic. And Bill Hicks is such a fascinating guy that was really in tune with fake news, even in the 80s and 90s, and really was ahead of his time in a lot of ways as a comedian. So I'm like, Brian, tell me everything. Plus, big Star Trek fan. So, he had me at hello.
Watching those origin stories behind some of our toy lines, like the G.I. Joe origin story was amazing. And so, I'm excited to hear that. But I wanted to tell you about a dinner I had because I thought you'd appreciate it.
Oh, please.
If there's time.
There's always time. As much time as you've got, Kurt. This is great. I'm loving every minute.
This is good. I'm proud that we're at an hour and 28 because my theory, if you're Johnny Carson, much like the way Johnny would have a comedian sit down after his set, I've noticed if you have a guest go more than an hour, then he must be doing something right. So I feel like I'm getting the Johnny Carson.
You made the club,
sit down on the couch.
Absolutely,
because it's going past an hour.
I'll take the comparison. That's lovely. Thank you.
I had to stall at the beginning of the episode to make sure I hit the hour mark, but I think now we're over the thing here. But no, I've been listening to you for a very, very long time, and I know how much you love the space program and NASA. And,
yes.
And I'm only bringing this up because I learned a couple of things when I had dinner with Buzz Aldrin.
Wow.
He came to our premiere of our film when it was at the LA Film Festival, and he knew Eddie, and Eddie knew him, and so they asked if I wanted to come to dinner, and we sat down at this restaurant in West Los Angeles, and I too am into the space program too. So I'm just sort of sitting here going, "That's Buzz Aldrin." And the the waiter comes by, takes all the orders, and there's just that sort of post-order lull. And I was like, fuck it. Hey, Buzz, what was it like going to the moon? Like, I was just like, this is my shot. Like, I don't know what else I got this opportunity. And for whatever reason, I don't know if he was in a good mood or whatever, he was just like, well, I'll tell you. And like, you know, he then just tells me for 2 hours, like moment for moment, how it all went down and why and where. And I'm just like, you know, my mind is like, the food's coming. I'm just like, I'm not eating right now. He's talking right now. I don't want to choke. And he told me 3 things that I didn't know. And I'm curious if you know about this, because you're an expert too. The first one, he said, when they landed on the actual moon, you know, all their training, they're getting through the, you know, him and Neil, they're putting on their helmet, you know, Neil obviously, you know, pulls rank and says, I'm going first, even though you're the captain of the ship and all that stuff. And they both kind of looked at each other for a second when they're opening the hatch and said, we never really accounted for all like the pressure of space and all of the sort of physics behind that. Let's take that extra moon boot and use it as a wedge in the door just in case it doesn't open back up.
Yeah, holy shit.
So like wow. As if you're like a porch in the old farm, they open the hatch, you're on the moon, they grab this extra boot and they wedge it in the, wow. the miracle of science being on the moon, they're using a boot to wedge the door open because they were afraid. They didn't know like this may not open back up again.
Right.
So they get on the moon, you know, and he's, you know, and then Neil and I are doing our thing and he's talking, doing his Buzz thing. And he told me that, and he showed me a photo, the famous Life magazine photo of Neil on the moon that you see all the time, you know, the one of him kind of like this.
Yes.
If you notice, he's leaning in a peculiar way, and we think it's because of the suit or the gravity. And Buzz says, I took that photo, and he's taking a leak right at that moment.
That's hilarious. So wow.
He said this iconic photograph was while Neil was urinating in his catheter. And like, if you really look at it, it's like, oh yeah, he's kind of like adjusting his self in a weird way. So now I can't look at this iconic photo because Buzz took that photo. It was like, he's like, took it, and Neil's like, yeah, I was just peeing while you took that photo. He's like, I'm sure this won't make it to a magazine and be an iconic piece of photography. But so again, I'm hearing this, and that also blows my mind. And I don't know if you know this part either. They go back up into the capsule, and mind you, it's tiny, as we all know, and they got these very bulky things. And they get back in after day one, and you know, they know it's time to sleep because they're supposed to sleep. You know, the whole mission is like mapped out to the T.
Yes.
And he decides to take the floor, and he's looking at this moon dust that's on the ground. They tracked in some moon dust, but amongst the moon dust, he says, I saw this little piece of something. I wasn't sure what it was, and for a split second, I was like, was this an alien thing? Did I pick up a piece of metal that was on the moon? And upon further investigation, he realized this was the switch that went on the thing for the ignition for them to go back up and redock with Michael Collins.
Holy shit.
So upon coming in, he like banged into the circuit bay and like literally broke the switch off because everything was like switches. And he said, Houston, you have a problem. And he basically said, I broke the switch off. And, you know, they said, okay, stay calm. We're going to figure this out. Try and get some sleep. So it's like,
oh my God.
He's like,
good luck.
We're marooned on the moon at this point, and now we're supposed to sleep. So what they figured out, he had a Bic pen and he had a cap. And upon ignition, they put this Bic pen cap in, hit it at the right time. That caused the circuit to break and allow the ignition to go and then fly back up into space to redock with Michael Collins. So I thought I knew everything, but hearing this firsthand from Buzz, he didn't tell me about aliens. He didn't tell me about anything, but he told me Neil is peeing. They had to put a boot in the door to keep the door open, and he broke the switch to fly back up to connect with Michael Collins. And you almost hear like Tom Hanks's voice, like Buzz, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, the you know, that's ironic timing because I was watching on HBO Max for the upteenth time the From the Earth to the Moon miniseries.
Great.
And literally was watching one of the episodes I was watching was the lunar module episode and everything, Spider. and just everything in terms of making it and all. And yeah, I mean, it's good Lord. I mean, so many things could have gone wrong.
It's a miracle. It's an
And,
absolute
and
miracle.
yeah, and you know, it's so funny, man. Me and my old partner from sports radio, Mike North, we were going to Vegas one time right around the millennium. And it's like, all right, what were the biggest accomplishments of the 20th century? And I can't remember what he said. And one of his buddies, who's a knucklehead, they said, and I'm like, first man on the moon. They're like, nah. I'm like, we left the planet and went to another, celestial body. I'm like, what is bigger than that? Nah, you're full of shit. I'm like, you guys are idiots. I'm like, that is the biggest thing that happened in the 20th century. No question. I was 4. And I've said this story before. My parents were very smart. We had all the National Geographic maps and posters of the crew and everything. And they're like, pointed me to the window and they're like, you see the moon? I'm like, yeah. And then they pointed me to the TV when they're walking around the moon. They're like, those guys are on the moon right now. And my 4-year-old mind got it right away. And I'm just like, and truly, man, and going back to the movie as well, I meant to say this earlier, and especially with Bezos and Branson and Musk doing their flights and stuff. When I fly on a plane, I'm an astronaut. And truly, I'm the only person that is giddy about takeoff. Because it's like, holy shit, we are leaving the ground and we're going from point A to point B and we're flying. And that to me is like, I've never lost that. I had it because I was of the Apollo generation, being a little kid. And to this day, it's still, I love flying. I put up with all the airport and TSA bullshit because I know I'm gonna, strap in, and Houston, we're gonna have a liftoff, and this is gonna be amazing. So I get it. I totally get it.
Can I ask you a question?
Anything.
I'm curious because I know you're not a big Star Wars guy.
No, but go on.
But I noticed that those who were like, I was 4 when Star Wars came out, but I've noticed people like yourself who was, at that age when the moon mission went, are kind of like, yeah, Star Wars, whatever. And I always wondered, like, for guys my age, we're like, we had Star Wars. Oh my God. And I always feel like, yeah, we had the actual moon. Like I feel like that, like after that, that's a tough act to follow in terms of like blowing your mind as a kid about accomplishments in space and all that kind of stuff.
Well, honestly, Star Trek felt like a legitimate extension of the reality we were all, experiencing. Right. And that's why even Rob Burnett, a guy that made Free Enterprise and is a fellow YouTuber, and that Apple Plus show For All Mankind, that is the alternate history of if the Russians beat us to the moon. Yeah. I love that show. And Rob is like, that literally could be a precursor to Star Trek. And that's I'm really like, yeah, you're right about that. Yeah. And I mean, so that's the thing is like, no, it really did. It didn't seem that implausible to leap from the Apollo missions to, well, yeah, eventually there'll be better spaceships and there'll be bigger crews. And they'll be tooling around the galaxy. Of course they will. Why not? Yeah. So that's why. And I mean, I like Star Wars fine. It's just that it was just more of a fantasy than it was like, again, possibly plausible extension of the real science that was going around it. So that's why we're not blasé, but just like, yeah, I was born in 1964. So I vaguely remember as a little kid, maybe seeing Star Trek on the screen, but when it was in syndication in the early 1970s, I was hooked. So by the time Star Wars had come out, I just had several years of Star Trek love already behind me. And I'm like, yeah, this is cool. Still love Star Trek more, but this is cool. So,
did you see the documentary that came out a couple of years ago, Apollo 11?
Probably. Go on.
It's the one where they, it turns out all that, archival footage of like rolling out the Apollo and all that stuff, that was shot in the equivalent of IMAX, like 70 millimeter film. And up until now, we've just seen these really bad, 4:3 crop versions. And so this filmmaker and his producer retransferred all this stuff. And just watching the trailer, you're like, holy shit. Like, it looks like it was shot yesterday with Michael Bay's crew, but it's like, this is real. This is happening. And they do a wonderful job documenting the whole mission from the Earth to the moon and back, just with the available footage that they were able to retransfer. And it's stunning. Like, it's
I'm
so
sure I
good.
saw it. I'm sure I saw it.
You have to have. Yeah.
I also watched when PBS did the history of the space program.
Yeah.
From the 50s through the Apollo missions and stuff.
Yeah.
No, man, it was the best. And again, that's why as bourgeois as it seems that the billionaires are in space and doing all this stuff, I'm like, this is great, and it only means that more space is coming. And if the government, I just think it was the dumbest thing in the world that they kind of, nutted the funding for NASA and stuff.
Yeah.
And thank God the private sector is picking up. What did you think of Ad Astra?
I hadn't seen it, and I've obviously I listened to your show, so I it seems like you're the only guy that likes it.
I know,
but like it's weird because you always ask the guests, and they're like, "Yeah, it's okay," and I'm like, "Oh, my heart breaks a little bit for you because I know how much of a torch you carry for this film. Like you're like, it's like 2001 of this, and like so I've heard your unexpected love for this, and so I'm waiting for it. Like me and my buddy Richard Hamilton, like we listen to your show, and then we'll get James to talk. We kind of have like a book club about Word Balloon. We'll like listen to the things.
That's very sweet, man. That's insane.
And that's one thing I always get. Like, oh, I hope they like it. Oh, they don't like it. So I'm gonna watch it. It's on my list. I plan to. Like so far, like you're right about Columbo. You're probably right about Ad Astra. So I will watch this at some point. But I'm afraid.
Sam Humphries and Bendis, I respect their tastes.
Yeah.
But they're like boring as hell. And I'm like, I thought it was really intense. I don't know. We saw the same movie. What can I tell you? But yeah, I don't know. Again, maybe being older and again being with that whole Apollo thing. Yep. I just loved the mundane kind of look of the moon after it's been conquered and already, literally it looks like an airport. There's a DHL, there's a subway, and literally Brad Pitt's going down on an escalator. And it's like, this could be an airport in Cleveland. Who cares? Yeah. And it's on the moon. And it's just I just love that weirdness of it that, things could get as they will likely, it's, what once was like Forest Land is now, they what do they say in the old song by Janis Joplin? They paved paradise and put up a parking lot.
Yeah.
Joni Mitchell.
That's Joni Mitchell. Yeah. They'd be very mad if we screwed that up.
Well, that's right. I had to correct myself. Absolutely. And I'm glad you knew as well. Kurt, great conversation, man.
Great conversation, buddy.
And great documentary, Stuntman on Disney Plus. They're now so worth watching. You really do get a great appreciation for the tradition of Hollywood stuntmen and also Eddie Braun's goal to fulfill Evel Knievel's destiny and jump the Snake River Canyon. It's a wonderful story, and Kurt does a hell of a job, and I can't wait to watch your Oliver Stone JFK effort, man. That's going to be great.
Hopefully it's not like Ad Astra where you're the only one that likes it.
Yeah, fingers crossed, man. Absolutely.
You'll carry that torch for us. I love it.
Please stay in touch, and when it's ready, wherever it lands, I would love to talk more about it and talk more, man. Because truly, it's. Would you say, final question, good time for documentaries? It seems like it because of the streaming platforms, and there's an ability to see these movies where you would really have to kind of hunt them down at the art houses and stuff. And luckily, living in Chicago, I got to see my share of some of the greats and everything. But yeah, would you say that it's a better time to make documentaries, or is it still tough?
Yeah, no, I think, distribution and finding the place where it goes will always be a challenge just because that's just like its own beast. But at the end of the day, you could put it on YouTube, you could put it on Vimeo. Like you don't need to have it be buried in the Netflix queue. But more than anything too, like what I learned, because this was like the second documentary I really made. I made one about my buddies who created the show Avatar: The Last Airbender. Sure, but that was kind of easy because they were like my closest friends from college. So I was like, well, that's never going to happen again because But what's really great, what my friend Rob, the guy we're talking about earlier, said the wonderful thing about documentaries is that you can just start. Like you don't have to wait for a development deal. You don't have to like get a script going. If you have a subject, like I know you talk about wanting to do that boxing, documentary. Like,
yes,
I mean, there's like, look at the Hollywood book. Oh, there's no rule here. It says I have to wait for something. You just kind of start doing it and start gathering footage and start getting interviews. And like, even if it's 2 or 3 years after you've started working, on footage, you can still start cutting it together. Like it's okay to, be on this trajectory that takes forever and more so than the average stuff. But like you can just start doing it. Like it's really quite real. You'll have to raise money to finish it, but you worry about that problem later in the process. So
well, I back in 2002, I made an audio documentary about Jack Dempsey and Gene Tunney and their fight for 1927, and this will be an audio documentary, so I don't have to worry about footage. And I really is just the research and putting the narrative down. I'm a big fan of, and I don't know if you listen to, you must remember this, the old Hollywood.
Katrina. Oh yeah,
yeah, Katrina.
Julie got me into that. Yeah.
Oh man, well there you go, man. And truly, like she is my template for. This is a great way to do a narrative audio documentary.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm positioning it. But I am doing research. I got my newspapers.com account, and I'm combing through the results and editorials about the fights of the time. And nice. I do think it's a fascinating thing. So yeah, man. No, again, we're doing Kinescope, me and Gabe Hardman every Thursday
which is
night.
Great, by the way. Like that.
Oh, thank you.
Like I know that you like. Oh, I love You Must Remember This and Katrina Longworth, but like you've kind of taken that template and then like blew it out of the water, man. Like it's really good. Like I love the intro and the music and all that kind of stuff, and like. And I know you like old radio shows. I loved all the original Dragnet stuff.
Oh, that's great, man. Go on.
No, but what's interesting in terms of audio documentary is like those were so authentic sounding because they weren't in the studio for a long time, I guess. Like you can hear like when Jack Webb and his buddy are picking up guns for some surveillance thing, like you hear like the echoey noise of like other cops going the thing, and it sounds like you're in LAPD headquarters, and like just like I bet there's some amazing audio of like some ring fights too that you can kind of work in and stuff. So I'm excited for you, man. This is gonna be done. This is gonna be great.
No, it's great. Well, again, man, I'm trying to, as you said, I'm trying to broaden Word Balloon beyond the obvious of comics, and it's like, hey, whatever interests me, and thankfully the name Word Balloon, it's like, well, each conversation is its own word balloon. So that's kind of, I'm like, like I always say, my father still would have slapped me for having a W as the title instead of starting at the beginning of the alphabet. But other than that, we're doing all right. Seriously,
well, you could do a word balloon show, and then they get the A, and then
that's what that's true. You're right.
Then I'll be right in the world, the alphabetical stuff.
Well, boxing starts with a B, so I'll be all right for that. So, Kurt, seriously, man, incredibly kind with your praise, and I really appreciate you sharing time and talking about Stuntman. It's absolutely worth people's time, and I'm happy to help promote it in any way I can. And I'm proud of Julie, and I'm great to meet you, and really well done. And please come back, because I would absolutely love to talk about the JFK thing. And as I said earlier, I'm watching He-Man in preparation for talking to Tim Seeley tomorrow, and the kerfuffle about the Masters of the Universe cartoon. My buddy Susan Eisenberg is in it as the Enchantress. And I'll be seeing her at Terrificon this weekend. But we got a lot of cool stuff. And another documentary, we did the video of it last week with Stacey Souther's great documentary about Valerie Perrine and Miss Tessmacher from the Superman movies. And sadly, like her career, which is amazing. Sadly, where she's at right now, she's got really bad Parkinson's disease. And it's a tough row. But it's an incredible 38-minute documentary that's also worth your time. And I'll promote it for the audio audience, that the audio version is coming this week as well, all leading up to Terrificon. So thanks, and thank you, Kurt. Thank you, everybody that